The Mardu are a group of Australian Aborigines known as people who live in the Western Desert. The word Mardu means man or person. The location is more of a cultural area and not necessarily an official laid-out boundary of land. They are situated in the Gibson Desert on the western side, covering over 500,000 square miles. Currently, there is an estimated number of Aboriginal that identify as Mardu and totals around 800 to 1,000. They usually live in very remote areas that include settlements and small groupings of people. Nowadays, many others live in more urban areas located in the northwestern coast. The general population size has been greatly diminished since the settlement of Europeans that resulted in migration away from the desert and traditional life that they once knew. The Western Desert is considered to be one of the harshest environments in the world. Rainfall is very low and watering holes are very rare in all seasons. When a rainfall does occur, filling up local lakes, such as the salt lake called Gumbu Bindi, this lake attracts many birds that they hunt, but the Mardu people never go near it for the fear of a mythological creature that's translated into will eat me, according to getting a living from the desert. These are mythological creatures that are said to be cannibals that eat intruders or strangers. This belief is so strong it keeps the Mardu people away from this watering hole, even though the lake could bring much needed water along with meat from the birds that gather in groups at the watering hole when it rains. Indigenous Australians are thought to have inhabited the country for well over 60,000 years, which is the longest continuous hunt-gathering society in the world and the oldest surviving culture on Earth. Traditionally, the Mardu Aborigines are hunting-gathering societies that are totally self-sufficient, and that's no small feat considering the arid and harsh land to which they live in. The Mardu people are incredibly resourceful people all around, but specifically when speaking of obtaining necessary resources of water and food, to the naked eye, one would not be able to tell the multitude of watering holes that they frequent. This is often known from passed down and learned knowledge, and not just from intuition as one might think. Wells are dug out by hand or by digging tool/dish, sometimes 20 feet below the surface. The mud that is dug out is then used to reinforce the walls as they venture deep under the ground in search for water. Many times a ladder-type structure is inserted into the ground to reach the water after digging. Grass and other material are used to cover the wells once found to keep the debris out of the water. It is also used because of the high rate of evaporation that occurs in such an arid environment. Sand and grasses are used to filter the water since it is common for the water to be foul-smelling of dead animals or smells of sitting water. The Mardu people are mostly considered to be an egalitarian society. Men hunt larger game such as a kangaroo, and the women hunt smaller reptiles and lizards. Depending on the season, both men and women gather such things as honey and grubs, and women collect fruit and tubers. Food is shared with other households, and most families cook evening meals outside that is used as a central meeting area for stories and other socializing. The Western Desert has a plethora of options when it comes to reptiles, flora, and other fauna. It is said in the article, Getting a Living in the Desert, that it's estimated at least 148 plant species are used by the Mardu, of which 106 species are potential food sources, which variously provide seeds, roots, and tubers, fruits, and gums. He further goes on to note that other important foods are insects that include the excretion, which is sweet-tasting. The area is covered in what looks like wheat, but is a different type of grass that supplies seeds and are ground into paste, flour, eaten raw, or cooked. You wouldn't think that a place that lacked a steady flow of water would have such fruit as tomatoes, but it does. And in fact, the desert is home to more than 6 species of bush tomatoes. The bush tomatoes are considered stake foods, and in good years they can be expected to produce fruit that are ready for harvest in the winter and spring. In good harvest years, the tomatoes are dried in the sun. After drying, they are soaked in water and lastly ground into paste. This is done before eating and can be stored up to several months. Tomatoes are also eaten raw as well. There are a variety of fruit food sources that are found as well. Bush plums, sweet blackberries, and even rock figs are among some of the sweetest gathered in the summer months. These can be eaten raw when found in large amounts or dried for future use. In areas that are woody, yams and tubers are found, and women are usually the ones hunting and harvesting them. They are located and found by the green leafy tops. The women then dig and follow the root system down to the base, which can be as deep as 3 feet. The roots swell and form tubers, which are carefully separated from the roots for a delectable food source. The tubers are eaten raw and roasted into ashes which can be stored and traveled with for many months. Another tuber that Tonkinson talks about is the bush onion. It is much easier to dig up than the yam because of the more easier accessible root system. There are over 50 different animals that live in the desert. This includes marsupials, reptiles, birds, rabbits, feral cats, and foxes that are hunted for food. Lizards are hunted and cooked by the women and are mostly reliable of all the meats to be found on a regular basis. Tomatoes and lizards are said to be the main staples in the Mardu diet. Other creatures that are hunted and gathered as food sources, but are much more rare, are insects, ants, small birds, to large birds such as eagles and emus and small mice. They have two categories of food, the meat and the plant food. They eat more meat, but consume dried fruit, seeds, and tubers when in abundance. Hunting lizards and other animals is done by way of fire. Mardu set fire to areas to expose the dens of lizards, snakes, and to chase out kangaroos as a way of hunting tactics. They also use fire as a way to clean an area of poisonous creatures before setting up camp. The Mardu people are resourceful people who traditionally live in small clans and use hunter-gathering techniques for subsistence. Despite the desolate environment that they live in, they survive off a variety of flora and fauna. This information is passed down between kin for the survival in what could be seen as arid area.